Tonight on the Daily Debrief, murder, money, and drugs. The case against an accused kingpin comes to a close. What's next for El Chapo? Plus, a baby dead, a mother on trial. Was she planning to flee?
We should have taken Nala Leo and ran.
Was she even upset? Some say no, others say...
Did you observe her as crying?
Yes, I did.
But why? Also, prosecutors struggle to make a link in the case of a family of 4 found buried in the California desert. This is the Daily Debrief for Thursday, January 31st. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Debrief. Closing arguments in the criminal trial of an accused Mexican drug lord on trial right here in New York City. Joaquin Guzman, better known as El Chapo, will soon learn his fate on drug and murder conspiracy charges in U.S. federal court. Prosecutors laid out how they say he transported drugs from Mexico to the United States, paid off police, and used violence to run his cartel. El Chapo escaped from a cell in a prison in Mexico long before his trial. Authorities later caught him and brought him here to face charges. Law&Crime Chief Investigative Correspondent Brian Ross has been in the courtroom for us. He's here in the newsroom tonight.
Just getting the mic all set, Aaron, and good afternoon to you. The government's final argument, the rebuttal, just began about 20 minutes ago. Most of the day spent with the defense closing argument. This has been a 10-week-long trial. Lots of witnesses, 56 total witnesses, former associates of El Chapo, bribes that he paid to allegedly the Mexican president, and among the most dramatic testimony, that of his mistress, who testified about his relationship with her, with his wife right in the front row watching the whole thing. Is there nothing you want to say at all? His wife, Emma, did not want to talk about any aspect of the trial when we caught up with her as she left the courtroom this week. The scene when El Chapo's mistress testified, with Emma looking on, was captured by renowned courtroom artist Christine Cornell. Cornell talked with me outside the court this week about that moment.
I sit next to Emma, his wife, and she's just like a... Oh, my goodness, what an eyeful. You can't help but double take on this woman. She's just like tied up like a bow. All high drama in the courtroom, Aaron. Lots of witnesses, lots of tapes for the jury to go through. They won't begin their deliberations until next Monday.
There's a lot coming up on Brian Ross Investigates. That's just a piece of it. I know I'll be watching tonight at 7. Brian, I'll see you then.
Thanks, Aaron.
Drugs and depression are an Iowa woman's official excuses for the death of her 4-month-old baby. This case is the second to go to trial involving the alleged murder of the infant Sterling Cohen. A jury already convicted the little boy's father, Zachary. Now the mother, Cheyenne Harris, is facing a jury herself. The trial against Zachary ended in a conviction. Prosecutors tried him under an Iowa law which says endangering a baby to the point the baby dies is murder. Zachary Cohen took the stand during his own trial, and he mostly blamed that mother, Cheyenne Harris, for the son's death. Harris was the little boy's stay-at-home caretaker. Here, she was led into the court to hear the emotional testimony that was sure to come. The case has been a close copy of the case the state presented against Zachary Cohen. The same first responders again broke down on the stand, recalling the horrible condition of the body of the dead baby. At one point, the defendant herself appeared to leave the courtroom crying. Among the witnesses today was a neighbor who witnessed the tragic events begin to unfold.
I went outside for a cigarette, and I noticed that Mr. Cohen was outside. And I said hi, but he didn't say anything back to me. So I walked over to him, and I said, "Is everything okay?" And that's when he stated to me that he was gone. And I said, "Who's gone?" He said, "My boy." I said, "What do you mean gone?" "He's just gone," he said.
And what did you say next?
I don't remember exactly what I said next, but I said, "You mean he's dead? He's gone?" I don't know.
What was Mr. Cohen doing?
He was outside smoking a cigarette.
Did that upset you?
A little bit. I told him, I said, if your baby's gone, I said, "Have you called anybody? Have you called 911? And he's like, "We don't know what to do." I was like, "Well, you need to put your cigarette down, and you should probably go inside and call 911.
Did you have a chance to interact with Cheyenne?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that interaction?
They were talking about funeral arrangements and some stuff like that. And at some point she had looked at me and Zach and said, "It seems like everybody's pointing their finger at me." And I agreed with her. That's exactly what it seemed like to me. Like everybody was pointing their finger at her.
And what did she say in response to your statement?
At that time, she kind of winged her arm out over to Zach and said, I told you we should have taken Nala, Leo, and ran.
Should have taken Nala, Leo, and ran?
Yeah.
And Leo would be the dog, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you respond to that at all?
I didn't know how to respond to that.
According to that neighbor, the parents were considering fleeing. The state will surely use that as evidence of consciousness of guilt. On cross-examination, though, that neighbor testified about the defendant's demeanor during that fateful conversation, long before rescue crews came running.
You did have an opportunity when you first met Ms. Harris to kind of assess her demeanor, and it sounds like you thought maybe she could use some help. Is that fair?
Yeah, she seemed a little disconnected. She didn't smile a lot. She just didn't seem happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said before that she seemed kind of depressed.
Yeah.
That she didn't smile a lot, and that was kind of your observation, probably of why she seemed depressed. Fair enough.
Yes.
And that also, have you said before that she just didn't seem all there?
Yeah, she seemed kind of disconnected.
Yeah. Okay.
His father called 911 to report Sterling was not breathing. A nurse was the first to arrive at the scene. She was supposed to perform CPR, but said it would have been pointless.
It was dark and it was stuffy, and there was a stench of urine there. I was looking for a crib. I couldn't see a crib. I said, "Where's the baby?" And he said, "In the swing." And it was dark. I said, "We've got to get some lights on in here. Turn the lights on." And he flipped the switch and the lights came on. And he walked away and he muttered something, and I don't know what he muttered. I went over so I could see Sterling, the baby. Found out that's what his name was. And to do my assessment, look, listen, and feel, his eyes were fixed and dilated, staring straight out. He had blood around his mouth, and I went to check a brachial pulse on him, and his arm was stiff and rigid and cold. All of his extremities were cold. His little feet were cold. His hands were clenched in a fist, and he wasn't breathing, and his clothes were like crusty.
When you saw Sterling, did you know that there was nothing you could do?
Yeah, there's no CPR. It just wasn't right.
A letter carrier testified that the nurse had trouble finding the right apartment. This letter carrier refused to look, but heard the defendant say something very important.
Did you see the baby?
No,
Why not?
because she wasn't performing any care, and I didn't feel I needed to have those memories.
So you chose not to look at the child?
Correct.
What happened next?
Tony said I should just console the parents. So I turned around and they were standing right outside of the bedroom, and I went up to them and told them I was sorry and what had happened. And she said that the baby was fine last night at 9:30 when I fed him. I said him, and he said, yes, Sterling.
So,
I said, do you mean this morning? And she said, I don't know.
Harris, her emotional state when you talked to her?
None. There was no tears. There were no... No emotion.
Did that reaction seem strange to you?
Yes.
Why?
She should have been crying and screaming and upset.
The sheriff himself, who showed up later, said when he was there, this defendant, Cheyenne Harris, was crying.
But you did observe Cheyenne in the kitchen when you initially came in?
Yes.
So you were able to see her demeanor?
Yes.
And did you observe her as crying?
Yes, I did.
Did you observe her as being upset?
Yes.
Okay.
So the question is why? Was she upset about her son, or was she upset because she was in trouble? A sheriff's deputy also testified about the smells. The stench of death in the room was unmistakable, and that deputy found evidence of at least one of the parents trying to cover it up.
When I got closer to baby and got down on his level, he's about 1.5 feet, 2 foot off the ground in that swing, I could smell, again, what I can only describe, because I've done this for years, as death. It's the smell of the body doing what the body does when someone's gone. That smell was stronger, of course, as I got closer. But I remember thinking that I could smell something fruity, or almost like air freshener-like. And at first I didn't realize what it was.
And did you ultimately realize what that fruity or smell was?
Yeah, right underneath the swing, or kind of off to the side, but right underneath the swing was these air freshener melts that you put in a candle, and they melt, and the scentsies, and they put a sense in the room.
Now, when you talked about the smell that you smelled of urine when you entered the room, would it be, based on what you smelled that day, would it be obvious to anybody that entered that room that it smelled of urine and the other things you described?
Yes.
Was it a strong smell?
And it was absolutely the strongest human urine smell I've ever smelled.
A paramedic took the stand and said it appeared the baby had been dead for at least 12 to 24 hours and that the mother did not appear to be on drugs.
I observed a infant in a swing, and infant was cold and wet. There was blood present on the infant's mouth and right hand. Obviously deceased. I touched the baby's forehead to visualize its eyes, and I lifted his left arm, and it was cold and stiff.
When you say the arm was stiff, in your training experience, what does that mean?
Rigor mortis.
Is there a particular time frame that you usually see rigor mortis?
From my experience, it's typically 12 to 24 hours, and it kind of depends on each case and the circumstances.
When you spoke with Cheyenne Harris, what was her demeanor?
She seemed normal. It's my opinion that she didn't show a state of emotion. She talked to me in a normal manner, responded to my questions appropriately.
Did she appear to be impaired or under the influence in any way?
In my opinion, no, she did not.
Today, a friend of the defendants testified about using drugs with the baby's father, and the defendant's mother, the baby's grandmother, testified that the baby was healthy after birth. Forensic death examiner Joseph Scott Morgan is with me on the debrief tonight. Joseph, one of the big questions is how long the baby was dead. The mother said the baby was alive the night before, but we heard the one witness say rigor mortis took 12 to 24 hours to set in. I know you've been following this. This is your wheelhouse. What's your opinion?
Well, there's another interesting part to this as well, Aaron. The father, boyfriend, he had, when he made the 9/11 call, he actually stated that he implied, at least, that they'd heard the child cry at like 9 a.m. or something. And, of course, that turns out not to be the case, apparently. Mm-hmm. Science would dictate that it's not. The mother claimed that she had fed the child at 9:30, that sort of thing. The child being stiff is very much consistent with the child having been down for at least 6 to 10 hours. I'm sure probably more like 12 hours. The child is very stiff, very cool to the touch, if you will. So, yeah, this child had been down for a protracted period of time.
Exactly. The science tells us that question. Some of the other evidence here is just not adding up. The air fresheners, were these parents just trying to cover up the smell of their dead son? Is that a possible argument here for the state?
Yeah, I think that it is. I mean, all we have to do is take into consideration the proximity to the body, which, you know, kind of tells the tale here, doesn't it? And also the other physical manifestations that we're talking about here. This child was in a deplorable state, Aaron. The child is obviously malnourished. The child's been dehydrated. That's going to come out in the autopsy report. But also, this child was living in this fetid condition in the swing, dirty diaper, with a horrible diaper rash that had eventually led to a septicemic condition. We had indwelling maggot that were existing along with this child. So it's my thought, having worked several neglect cases like this, even involving adults, elderly adults, that when people were there and had spent time there, they would have actually have had several generations of flies lighting on their person in there as well. So those maggots had probably existed with the child even in life. This is not something that just presented after death, which makes this all the more gruesome.
Exactly. Joseph Scott Morgan, appreciate your opinions. Still ahead tonight on the Debrief, we head back to a case in California where a family of 4 turned up dead in shallow graves in the Mojave Desert. Missing families' graves. Were they killed in their home? That when we return. Now to the case of the California man accused of murdering a family of 4. Defendant Charles Merritt is accused of killing his business associate Joseph McStay, McStay's wife, and the 2 McStay boys. First, the McStays disappeared, and then authorities said they may have fled to Mexico to avoid deaths. But the authorities backtracked despite this footage. It turned out the entire family was actually buried in the Mojave Desert. Prosecutors then charged the defendant, saying he killed them for money. The state promised it would prove the victims were killed in their home. However, there's no conclusive evidence of blood in the family home. The state presented pictures of tiny droplets of suspected blood, possible blood. The police testify they didn't even notice the spots until they took their photos back to the police station and enlarged them. By that point, the evidence had been wiped clean. There was nothing left to test, and therefore, no one is sure what those spots really are. The state tried to clear that up by asking a medical examiner if a brutal attack with a hammer would leave blood at the scene. Here is her opinion.
Now, could an injury like this occur without there being any actual blood that comes out on the outside of the skin?
Yes.
How could that occur?
Because you will have blood coming out of the skin if there was a laceration, an open wound. With a trauma like this, you're definitely going to have external injuries, but it could be a bruise or an abrasion. It doesn't have to be a laceration.
How about some of the other fractures that we looked at with respect to Summer McStay? Is it possible for those injuries to have occurred without external lacerations?
Based on the number of pieces of skull that are broken, you would expect that there would be some lacerations, but not all of the skull fractures need to have an overlying laceration.
Is it possible you could incapacitate somebody to a certain degree without causing a laceration to the skull with blunt force trauma?
Yes.
Well, at first, the medical examiner says it's possible to not have a lot of blood. Then the defense fought back.
With this type of destruction, I guess, to the skull, as they're saying, you would expect to see lacerations.
With this type of trauma resulting in multiple pieces, I would expect lacerations on the scalp.
And for premature skull was, I guess you'd say, shattered.
Yes.
And this again would lead to the same type of excessive bleeding that you described with Joseph McStay.
it would lead to pooling of blood, such as Joseph McStay.
So now the experts saying the injuries would cause blood to pool. That seems to be a reverse phase. Today, the state struggled to push a theory forward that the missing family's towels and mats from the bathroom in their home matched evidence found in the family's graves.
During your review of the investigation, did you learn any other information about terry cloth robes?
Not 100% sure I understand the question.
Okay. During your investigation, did you get any other information about terry cloth robes?
Yes.
What did you learn regarding terry cloth robes?
Your Honor, objection, foundation, and hearsay. Nobody learned.
Sustained.
As part of your investigation, you're looking to try to match up stuff that's found in the graves with stuff that's in the homes, or that was in the homes in 2010 from the photographs you saw.
Yes, sir.
Was there, in any of the photographs you saw, 4 terry cloth infant robes?
No.
Did you have information in your investigation that 4 terry cloth robes were purchased by Summer McStay on February 4th?
Your Honor, we're going to object now to getting in hearsay and also leading a witness without foundation.
The objection sustained is the hearsay.
This case has been a bumpy ride, in part due to the way the state is trying to introduce that evidence. Back one more time tonight with forensic death examiner Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph, we've been over this a couple of times. I want to ask you, though, what's your assessment of whether these victims' injuries would have caused significant blood loss at the scene where they were killed?
Yeah, you know, at first blush, I think, Aaron, for me, if you're talking about pounding somebody in the chest with a heavy object, maybe not. There's still going to be lacerations, in my experience at least. But we're talking about striking these people in the head. We saw a fractured jaw there. Even if there wasn't an external laceration and this was done in life, you would have people that were coughing up medium velocity blood, or low velocity at least, at the scene. So you would have it kind of spewing forth from the mouth. Mm-hmm. As fractured as these skulls were, just imagine, if you will, if we took a bunch of soda bottles, old-fashioned glass soda bottles, and put them into a plastic bag and crack them with a hammer.
I'd love to hear the analogy. We got to wrap up for the night.
No problem.
We understand the point. So a lot of debate around this. Thanks a lot for joining us. A reminder, folks, I'll be back on the debrief from 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, depending on testimony in the McStay case. I'll be back for some of you with more extended coverage here on Law and Crime.